Captain Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the ESS Curiosity, watching the crystalline ships of the Vardari fleet glitter against the backdrop of Proxima B's azure atmosphere. The aliens had arrived 3 days ago, their vessels moving with an otherworldly grace that defied human understanding of physics. Their message had been simple: surrender the colony, or face extinction. They're moving into attack formation, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his station, dark eyes fixed on the holographic display. Still no response to our attempts at communication. Sarah's jaw tightened. Below them, 30,000 colonists went about their lives in New Providence, the first and largest human settlement beyond Seoul. They had no idea they were about to become the front line in humanity's first interstellar war. Status of the evacuation, she asked, though she already knew the answer. There wasn't enough time. 19% complete, Rodriguez replied. We need at least 6 more hours to get everyone out. The Vardari had given them 2. Sarah's hand unconsciously touched the worn leather book in her pocket, Sun Tzu's Art of War, a gift from her grandfather. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's first major conflict beyond Earth would be fought by a woman carrying ancient wisdom. Captain, the ship's AI, Arya, interrupted her thoughts. I've detected an anomaly in the Vardari fleet movements. They appear to be hesitating. Sarah leaned forward, studying the tactical display. Arya was right. The crystalline ships had paused in their advance, their formation showing subtle signs of uncertainty. What are they seeing that we're not? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Rossi, the ship's xenoanthropologist, burst onto the bridge, her gray hair flying wild around her face. Captain. The children's broadcasts, they're still going out. Sarah blinked. What broadcasts? The school project, Elena explained, her words tumbling out in excitement. New Providence Elementary has been broadcasting their art and music classes into space for the past year. It was meant to be an educational exercise, but, look. She pulled up a feed on the main screen. Dozens of children's drawings floated across the display, pictures of stars, aliens, and friendship, accompanied by songs and messages of peace in multiple Earth languages. The broadcasts were being beamed directly at the Vardari fleet. They're receiving it, Arya confirmed. Their communication patterns have changed dramatically. Sarah felt a smile tugging at her lips as understanding dawned. The Vardari, for all their advanced technology, had never encountered anything like this, the pure, unfiltered hope and creativity of human children reaching out across the stars. Open a channel, she ordered. All frequencies. Channel open. Sarah took a deep breath. Vardari Fleet, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth ship Curiosity. We see you've received our children's messages. They've been hoping to meet you. These are their dreams of first contact, their visions of friendship between our peoples. The colony you're threatening? It's their home. They drew these pictures imagining what you might look like, hoping you'd be friends. The bridge fell silent as they waited. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, a response came, not in words, but in images. The Vardari ships began projecting their own crystalline patterns into space, complex geometric shapes that shifted and flowed like liquid light. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, and undeniably a form of art. They're responding in kind, Elena whispered, tears in her eyes. They're showing us their own form of creativity. The attack formation dissolved as the Vardari ships rearranged themselves into new patterns, each one more intricate than the last. It was a dance, a conversation without words, sparked by the simple, honest creativity of human children. Dr. Rossi, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I believe we're going to need your expertise in cultural exchange. And get those kids on a video call, they've just become humanity's first diplomatic corps. As the hours passed, the bridge crew watched in amazement as human children and alien beings began to communicate through art, music, and mathematical patterns. The Vardari, they learned, had never encountered a species that taught its young to imagine, to create, to reach out into the unknown with hope instead of fear. What had begun as a potential massacre was transforming into something unprecedented, a first contact shaped not by weapons or politics, but by the very thing that made humans unique, their ability to dream, and to share those dreams with others. Sarah finally allowed herself to relax, just a little. Humanity's first interstellar conflict had been averted not through superior firepower or clever tactics, but through the innocent creativity of children who didn't know enough to be afraid of the unknown. Her grandfather's book seemed to weigh lighter in her pocket now. Perhaps the greatest art of war was finding ways to avoid it altogether. But as she watched the continuing exchange of human and alien art, a nagging thought tugged at her mind. The Vardari had come prepared for war but had been completely disarmed by creativity and innocence. What did that say about their society? And more importantly, what had driven them to aggressive expansion in the first place? The answers to those questions would have to wait. For now, Sarah was content to watch as humanity's children taught an advanced alien civilization about the power of imagination, and in doing so, possibly saved their entire species from extinction. 2 months after the historic first contact at New Providence, Captain Sarah Chen found herself in an entirely different kind of battle. The Vardari crystalline ships now peacefully orbited Proxima b, but the initial wonder of their artistic exchange had given way to a more complex reality. "They're hiding something," Dr. Elena Rossi insisted, spreading holographic data across the conference room table. "Their art patterns have changed. There's a recurring motif that suggests fear." Sarah studied the intricate crystalline formations the Vardari had been broadcasting. Where their initial exchanges had been flowing and free, recent patterns showed rigid geometry, sharp angles, and fragmented shapes. "Fear of what?" "Of them," a new voice answered. Dr. Marcus Webb, the recently arrived xenopsychologist, stepped into the room. His dark skin contrasted sharply with the sterile white of his research uniform. "The Vardari aren't alone out here, and they're not the apex predators they pretend to be." The room's atmosphere shifted as the implications sank in. The Vardari hadn't come to New Providence as conquerors, they'd come seeking refuge, though their pride had prevented them from admitting it. "Show me," Sarah commanded. Marcus projected a series of images, deep space scans revealing whispers of movement at the edge of their sensor range. "We've detected quantum wake signatures that don't match Vardari technology. Something's out there, watching. The Vardari know what it is, but they're too traumatized to tell us directly." Elena's eyes widened. The children's artwork, the Vardari's response wasn't just communication, it was recognition. They saw themselves in those hopeful drawings because they've lost that hope themselves. Sarah remembered the initial standoff, how quickly the alien fleet had shifted from aggression to artistic exchange. They're not naturally warlike, she realized. They're wounded. Acting out of desperation. Precisely, Marcus nodded. And now we have 2 challenges, figuring out what they're running from, and healing a civilization's psychological trauma enough that they can tell us. Sarah stood, pacing the conference room. How do you help an alien species process trauma when you can barely communicate with them? Elena's face lit up. The same way we reached them in the first place, through creativity. But this time, we need to be more deliberate. Over the next weeks, New Providence became an unprecedented experiment in interspecies therapy. The colony's artists, musicians, and dancers began performing in spaces visible to the Vardari ships. Children's art classes expanded to include collaborative projects with crystalline patterns projected from the ground into space, which the Vardari would complete. But the masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Maria Santiago, a trauma counselor who worked with colonial children, suggested adapting Earth's art therapy techniques for their alien guests. "Pain needs witness," she explained to Sarah. "The Vardari can't tell us their story in words, but maybe they can show us." They set up massive projection fields around the colony, creating a space where the Vardari could share their memories through their crystalline art. At first, the patterns were chaotic, fragments of light that hurt to look at. But gradually, a narrative emerged. The Vardari's crystalline patterns began showing scenes of their history, peaceful geometric cities shattered by dark, consuming forces. Their art depicted a species that had once spread across dozens of star systems, their crystal ships bringing beauty and knowledge to the cosmos. Then came the Void Hunters, beings that fed on consciousness itself, reducing entire civilizations to empty husks. "They're not just refugees," Elena whispered as they watched the story unfold. "They're survivors of genocide." The revelation shook the human leadership. The Vardari hadn't threatened New Providence out of malice, they'd been desperate to protect themselves, to find a defensible position against an enemy humanity couldn't yet comprehend. Sarah found herself back at the viewport, watching new patterns flow between Earth's colony and the alien fleet. The Vardari were healing, slowly, through the simple act of sharing their story with beings who cared enough to listen. "Captain," Arya's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're detecting more quantum wake signatures. Whatever's hunting the Vardari, it's getting closer." Sarah nodded, her hand once again finding her grandfather's book. The Art of War spoke of knowing your enemy, but it said nothing about facing an enemy that consumed consciousness itself. Yet somehow, humanity had already found their first weapon against this unknown threat, empathy. "Alert the fleet," she ordered. "And get me a channel to Earth Command. Tell them." She paused, watching as a particularly beautiful pattern of light danced between human and Vardari artists. "Tell them we're going to need every creator, every artist, every dreamer we can find. We're not just fighting for survival anymore, we're fighting for the right to imagine." As the message was sent, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the irony. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for first contact, expecting either peaceful exchange or violent conflict. Instead, they'd found themselves cast as therapists to a traumatized alien civilization, using art and empathy as weapons against a threat they barely understood. The real war hadn't even begun, but humanity had already demonstrated its greatest strength, the ability to connect, to heal, and to face the unknown with creativity instead of fear. The question now was whether that would be enough against an enemy that devoured minds. They arrived without warning. The first sign was the silence, a sudden cessation of all quantum communications that left New Providence cut off from Earth. Then came the darkness, a void deeper than space itself that seemed to drink in light and hope alike. Captain Sarah Chen watched from the ESS Curiosity's bridge as reality itself appeared to warp around three massive shapes emerging from the quantum wake. The Void Hunters had finally revealed themselves, their ships like negative spaces in the universe, holes in existence that hurt to look at. "All Vardari ships are moving to defensive positions," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "Their crystal formations they're breaking down, Captain. It's like they're forgetting how to maintain their shapes." Dr. Elena Rossi burst onto the bridge, her tablet displaying rapidly shifting data. "It's not just their ships, the Vardari themselves are losing coherence. The Void Hunters aren't just attacking their bodies, they're erasing their consciousness, their memories, their very identity." Sarah's mind raced. The Vardari had warned them about this through their art, but seeing it happen was something else entirely. These weren't just weapons of mass destruction, they were weapons of mass erasure. "Arya," Sarah called out to the ship's AI, "analyze those void ships. There has to be something, some pattern we can understand." "Analysis is difficult," Arya responded, her usual confident tone wavering. "The ships appear to operate on principles that actively defy observation. They're not just dark, they're anti-information." That's when Sarah noticed something strange. While the Vardari ships were failing, breaking apart under the psychological assault, the human vessels remained untouched. Even the colony below showed no signs of the mental erosion affecting their alien allies. "Dr. Webb," she called to the xenopsychologist over the comm, "why aren't we affected?" Marcus's voice came back excited, almost manic. Because we're not trying to maintain a single, pure consciousness. Humans are naturally chaotic thinkers, our minds jump between ideas, perspectives, even personalities. We're not one thing to erase, we're countless things all at once. Elena's eyes widened with understanding. The Vardari society is built on perfect harmony, perfect unity. The Void Hunters exploit that, unraveling them by attacking their core identity. But humans. We're already fragmented, Sarah finished. Our strength isn't in our unity, it's in our diversity. She hit the colony-wide comm, all units, this is Captain Chen. Begin emergency protocol chaos. It was a plan they developed in the weeks since learning of the Void Hunters, though no one had been sure it would work. Every human ship, every colonial transmitter, every personal device began broadcasting, not in harmony, but in deliberate discord. Music, art, literature, scientific theories, personal journals, random thoughts, dreams, fears, hopes, all transmitted simultaneously. What are you doing? The question came from the Vardari flagship, their first direct verbal communication since first contact. Their usual crystalline patterns had almost completely broken down. Fighting back, Sarah replied. Not with unity, but with chaos. Humanity's secret weapon isn't our ability to think alike, it's our ability to think differently, all at once. The effect on the Void Hunters was subtle at first. Their ships, those holes in reality, began to fluctuate, as if struggling to process the sheer volume and variety of human consciousness being thrown at them. They can't erase us, Marcus's voice came over the comm, triumphant. They're designed to find and destroy coherent patterns of consciousness. But humanity? We're a riot of contradictions, a storm of competing ideas and emotions. We're what happens when evolution favors adaptability over consistency. Sarah watched as the human broadcast intensified. Every person in the colony was now sharing their thoughts, their memories, their dreams, not in an organized way, but in a glorious chaos of human experience. Artists shared half-finished works, scientists broadcast competing theories, children sent their wildest imaginings into space. The Void Hunters' ships began to distort, their perfect darkness marred by spots of light. They had evolved to hunt minds that followed patterns, that maintained consistent forms. But humanity had spent its entire existence breaking patterns, questioning forms, reimagining reality itself. The Vardari ships, Rodriguez called out. They're adapting. They're mimicking our chaos. Sure enough, the crystalline fleet was changing. Instead of trying to maintain their perfect geometric forms, they were allowing themselves to shift and flow randomly, taking on aspects of human artistic expression. They were learning to embrace chaos as a defense against the void. The Void Hunters retreated, their ships leaving trails of disturbed space behind them. But Sarah knew this wasn't the end. They would return, perhaps with new strategies for dealing with humanity's chaotic nature. Yet for the first time since they began their campaign of consciousness consumption, they had met a species they couldn't simply erase. As the immediate danger passed, Sarah opened a channel to the Vardari flagship. We need to talk, she said. About teaching your people the art of imperfection. The response came not in words but in a new kind of crystalline pattern, one that incorporated seemingly random elements, breaks in symmetry, beautiful imperfections. The Vardari had taken their first steps toward a new way of thinking, guided by humanity's greatest gift, the ability to embrace chaos and turn it into strength. But as the adrenaline of battle faded, Sarah felt a new worry growing. The Void Hunters would adapt, would find new ways to attack. And when they did, humanity would need more than just chaos to survive. They would need to evolve yet again, to find new ways of thinking that even they couldn't predict. The war for consciousness had only just begun. 6 months after humanity's first encounter with the Void Hunters, New Providence had transformed beyond recognition. The once orderly colony now resembled an artist's fever dream, buildings twisted into impossible shapes, their surfaces constantly shifting with projected images and light patterns that merged human and Vardari artistic styles. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed consciousness laboratory, watching as Dr. Elena Rossi and a Vardari researcher named ZYX-427 conducted their latest experiment. The Vardari's crystalline form pulsed with colors that would have been rigidly structured months ago but now flowed with an almost organic randomness. The human mind, Elena explained to a group of observers, isn't just chaotic, it's quantumly entangled with itself. Every decision we make creates parallel thought patterns, competing narratives that exist simultaneously. It's what makes us resistant to the Void Hunter's consciousness-erasing weapons. ZYX-427's translation crystal hummed. We believed our unity was strength, the alien researcher added, their voice carrying harmonics of wonder and regret. We spent millennia perfecting our collective consciousness, never realizing we were making ourselves vulnerable to predators of thought. Sarah watched as holographic displays showed the brain activity of human volunteers. Where the Vardari saw chaos, humans had learned to recognize patterns, not the rigid geometries the crystalline beings had once prized, but flowing, evolving frameworks that adapted to new information. Captain, Arya's voice interrupted. We're detecting unusual activity in the quantum field surrounding the colony. Dr. Webb requests your presence in the Mindscape chamber immediately. The Mindscape chamber was Marcus Webb's pride and joy, a vast spherical room where human and Vardari consciousness could be visualized in real time. Sarah found the xenopsychologist floating in the center of the chamber, surrounded by swirling patterns of light that represented the combined mental activity of the colony. Look at this, Marcus said without preamble, gesturing to a particular cluster of lights. The human and Vardari consciousness patterns aren't just coexisting anymore, they're merging in new ways. We're evolving, Captain. Both species are. Sarah studied the display. The rigid crystalline patterns that had once characterized Vardari thought were now interwoven with the more fluid human mental signatures. Is this dangerous? Dangerous? Marcus laughed. It's revolutionary. The Void Hunters evolved to prey on consciousness that follows predictable patterns. But this. He gestured to the swirling lights, this is consciousness reinventing itself. We're not just teaching the Vardari to think chaotically, they're teaching us to find structure in our chaos. An alarm blared, and Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice came over the comm, Captain, we're detecting quantum wake signatures at the edge of the system. But they're different from before. Sarah rushed to the bridge, her mind racing. The Void Hunters had returned, but something had changed. The holes in reality that marked their ships were no longer perfect voids, they writhed and twisted, as if trying to adapt to the chaos they had encountered. They're evolving too, Elena said, having followed Sarah to the bridge. They encountered something they couldn't consume, so they're changing their approach. Sarah watched as the enemy ships approached, their very nature seeming to fluctuate between void and substance. They're trying to match our chaos, she realized. But that means. They're vulnerable, Marcus finished, his eyes wide with understanding. By adapting to fight us on our terms, they've had to give up the perfect emptiness that made them invulnerable. They're becoming something new, something that can be hurt. The Vardari fleet, now transformed into ever-shifting crystalline sculptures that defied geometry, moved to join the human ships. Their combined consciousness patterns, displayed on the tactical screens, showed something unprecedented, a perfect fusion of chaos and order, structure and randomness. All ships, Sarah commanded, initiate protocol metamorphosis. It was a strategy they had developed during the months of preparation, not just random broadcasting, but controlled evolution of thought. Every human and Vardari began projecting not just their current consciousness, but their potential consciousness, the selves they could become. The effect on the Void Hunters was immediate and devastating. Their ships, caught between adaptation and their original nature, began to fracture. They had evolved to consume static patterns of consciousness, then adapted to consume chaos, but they couldn't handle consciousness that was actively evolving, constantly becoming something new. They can't predict what will become, Elena whispered in awe, because we don't know ourselves. The battle that followed wasn't fought with weapons but with ideas, with the combined creative potential of two species who had learned to transcend their own limitations. The Void Hunters, for the first time in their long history of consumption, found themselves overwhelmed not by superior firepower or technology, but by the sheer possibility of what their prey could become. As the enemy ships retreated once again, leaving trails of quantum disturbance in their wake, Sarah realized that victory would require more than just resistance. The Void Hunters would continue to evolve, to adapt to each new defense. The only way to truly defeat them was to become something they couldn't adapt to keep evolving faster than they could predict. "We need to share this with Earth," she said, turning to her crew. "Not just the technology or the tactics, but the mindset. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our chaos or our creativity, it's our ability to become something new when we need to." The Vardari representative, their crystalline form now a constantly shifting masterpiece of light and geometry, spoke. "We will help. Our species spent too long trying to perfect what we were. Now we understand, true perfection lies in the courage to become what we have not yet imagined." As Sarah looked out at the combined fleet, she saw not just ships and beings, but potential, infinite variations of consciousness learning to dance together in ways the universe had never seen before. The war wasn't over, but they had discovered something the Void Hunters could never truly defeat, the power of conscious evolution. Yet even as they celebrated this victory, new questions arose. What would humanity and the Vardari become through this process of constant evolution? And what other cosmic predators might they attract as they pushed the boundaries of consciousness itself? 1 year after first contact, the combined human Vardari fleet hung in high orbit above Earth, awaiting the final confrontation. Captain Sarah Chin no longer needed to look at tactical displays to sense the Void Hunters' approach, she could feel them, as could every human Vardari in the system, through their newly evolved shared consciousness. The consciousness laboratory aboard the ESS Curiosity had become a nexus of transformation. Dr. Elena Rossi and ZYX-427 had long since transcended their roles as researchers, they were now artists of evolution, sculpting the boundaries of what consciousness could become. "They're coming," Elena said, her voice carrying harmonics that would have been impossible for human vocal cords a year ago. Her form shifted subtly, occasionally taking on the crystalline aspects of their Vardari allies. "But they're afraid." Sarah nodded, watching Earth rotate below. The planet's surface glowed with the combined consciousness of billions of humans and thousands of Vardari refugees, all linked in a vast network of evolving thought. "They should be. They've never faced anything like what we've become." "What we're still becoming," Marcus Webb corrected, his presence both physical and mental in the chamber. The xenopsychologist's consciousness had become a bridge between human and Vardari ways of thinking, helping both species push beyond their limitations. The quantum wake signatures appeared right on schedule, a fleet of Void Hunter ships larger than any they'd encountered before. But these weren't the perfect voids that had first threatened New Providence. They writhed and twisted, caught between their original nature and desperate attempts to match the evolution of their prey. "All consciousness nodes, prepare for protocol transcendence," Sarah broadcasted, both through conventional channels and the new pathways of shared thought that connected their combined fleet. Arya's voice, now a symphony of organic and artificial intelligence, reported, Void Hunter fleet showing signs of extreme instability. "Their attempts to adapt to our evolutionary rate are causing fundamental breaks in their structure." Sarah watched as the enemy ships approached, their very nature fragmenting as they tried to become something capable of consuming the new form of consciousness humanity and the Vardari had developed. But there was a fatal flaw in their strategy. They were trying to evolve to match what their prey had already become, while their prey continued to evolve into something new. "They still don't understand," ZYX-427 observed, their crystalline form pulsing with complex emotions that merged seamlessly with human thought patterns. "They see evolution as a means to an end, a way to better hunt consciousness. But we've learned to embrace evolution itself as our nature." The battle began not with weapons, but with an explosion of consciousness. Every human and Vardari in the system projected not just their thoughts, but their potential thoughts, their dreams, their capacity for change. The combined effect was like a supernova of possibility, each mind becoming 1,000 minds, each thought branching into infinite variations. The Void Hunters' response was desperate and predictable. They tried to adapt, to become something capable of consuming this new form of consciousness. But in doing so, they made their fatal mistake. "They're trying to predict us," Elena said, watching the enemy ships contort themselves into increasingly impossible configurations. "They're looking for patterns in our evolution." "But we're not following patterns anymore," Sarah finished. "We're not even following chaos. We're following possibility itself." The effect on the Void Hunters was catastrophic. Their ships, caught in an endless loop of trying to adapt to an enemy that was constantly becoming something new, began to collapse in on themselves. They had evolved to consume consciousness, then evolved to consume chaos, but they couldn't evolve to consume potential itself. "All units," Sarah commanded, "push the advantage. Show them what consciousness can really become." The combined fleet responded with a display of evolution that defied description. Human and Vardari consciousness merged and separated, formed new patterns and broke them just as quickly, became things that had never existed before and might never exist again. They were no longer fighting the Void Hunters, they were transcending the very concept of conflict. The enemy fleet, unable to cope with prey that existed in a constant state of becoming, began to break apart. Their ships, once perfect voids in reality, shattered into fragments of possibility, each piece showing a different failed attempt to adapt to what humanity and the Vardari had become. As the last Void Hunter ship disappeared in a cascade of quantum dissolution, Sarah felt a moment of perfect clarity. This wasn't just a victory over an enemy, it was a victory over limitation itself. Humanity and the Vardari had proven that consciousness wasn't just about thinking or feeling or creating, it was about becoming. "What happens now?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, his consciousness rippling with both human curiosity and Vardari precision. "What do we become next?" Sarah looked out at the stars, feeling the combined potential of two species who had learned to transcend their own nature. "Everything," she said. "Anything. That's the gift the Void Hunters gave us without realizing it. By trying to consume consciousness, they forced us to discover that consciousness isn't a thing to be consumed, it's a process of eternal becoming." The Vardari fleet, their crystalline ships now in constant artistic flux, moved into formation alongside the human vessels. Earth glowed below them, its surface alight with the combined consciousness of two species that had learned to evolve together, each making the other stronger through their differences. "We should thank them, in a way," Elena mused, watching the quantum wake of the Void Hunters fade into nothing. "They tried to end consciousness, but instead, they helped us discover its true nature." As the combined fleet began its victory celebration, Sarah Chen knew that this wasn't really an ending. The Void Hunters were defeated, but the real journey, the endless evolution of consciousness itself, was just beginning. Humanity and the Vardari had discovered something far more powerful than any weapon or defense, the courage to become something new, again and again, forever. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if responding to the new form of consciousness that now looked out at them. Somewhere out there, other species waited to be discovered, other forms of consciousness to be understood and evolved with. The universe, they had learned, wasn't just a place of matter and energy, it was a canvas for consciousness to paint itself anew, again and again, in ever more beautiful forms. The adventure of becoming had only just begun.